I go! This hand of mine is burning red!
Its loud roar tells me to grasp victory!
Erupting, burning finger!
Yo,
Whoa!
What's up, guy?
Yo, Sleepy.
Living as an EG Magnum and Gustav the 13th, some of my favorite Gundam folks. How y'all doing today?
Subtle.
Well, we noticed you've been streaming Gundam Breaker 4 a bunch recently.
Yeah?
So, are you gonna reveal like you did the other games a while back?
Dude.
Stop playing around. You know you want to review it, so get on with it already.
What?
Dude.
I'm just busy. I mean, maybe if...
What do you mean
God,
if?
just get
go
on with
get
it,
the
guy.
video
For
done.
the
You
last
got this.
time,
You know
you're
what
gonna
you
take
need
all
to get
year, and
done.
then it's
Don't
gonna be
wait a
too late.
week.
Blah.
Wait. Back up. Quick question. How did y'all get in here?
Yeah, no. Don't worry about it.
You don't want to know. Nice camera, though.
Here's how'd you get on my computer?
Don't worry about it. You don't want to know the answer anyway.
You want to get it, that's fine. So long as you promise to get rid of it. Let's swing after it. You're closer, so you
Hey, Giant,
Yo, Tiger, what's up? I haven't heard from you in a while.
weren't you gonna review Gundam Breaker 4?
Who put you up to this?
Oh, don't worry about that. You don't want to know the answer anyway.
Bro, when you gonna do the video, bro? Like, stop playing, man. We need the video, man. I'm out here cracked out. Hector, stop playing!
Alright already, I'll do the video. Y'all gotta relax, please. Y'all doing too much. Holy!
Quit the yapping. Get to work.
How did you get in my house?
You do not want the answer to that.
Cool. Get out.
Hey, yo, Giant, let's go!
Well, I wasn't sure if I'd ever end up here again, but hey, to this day, some of my most watched reviews I've ever made have been my now almost 5-year-old reviews on New Gundam Breaker, which was a total flop, and Gundam Breaker 3, which was a better game, but I completely burnt out on these games by the time I made the video for that out of what felt like obligation. All the same, this period of my content was one where I felt as though I was finally settling on what I actually wanted to do here. I had this channel for years before that, but uploaded only raw gameplay straight from my PS4 after teaching myself how to edit off of the Share Factory software on PS4. I wish I was kidding, but it eventually set me down the path that led me to try to do more considered content on this channel. I look back on this time fondly as a formative period for the channel. Also, I definitely wasn't there yet, and recently watching these old videos back made me cringe so hard that I thought I was gonna go into convulsions. I didn't write scripts for my videos in the beginning as I do now, and when I eventually started to do that, I found it hard to follow the script, which affected my delivery and the way that I interject with things that I already write because I think of them in the moment. Still, it's interesting to see how humbly I started and where we are now. Also, shout out to the editors who make sure my content is as good as possible. Right, Zoner?
Oh, yeah. Totally, dude. Totally. Totally.
Now, as for why I was watching those old videos back, well, you can guess by the title of this video. I don't think I'll ever truly be able to express how blindsided I was seeing the reveal trailer for Gundam Breaker 4 popping up at a Nintendo Direct in February. And while the chat was going crazy about a new Gundam game coming to the Switch, I was kinda... I needed to let this sit for a while, because I didn't respond to this with much enthusiasm at all. But hey, even though the developers of this game, Crafts and Meister, were the same from NGB, they were also responsible for pretty much every other GB game, including GB3, which I liked a fair amount better, so I was willing to save room for this. I mean, that trailer was coming off as fairly more polished than the previous game, and they actually had a beta this time around that was well received, so in the weeks leading up to the release, I stopped being bitter and actually got excited. I gotta thank all my content creator friends too, because they low-key bullied me into covering this game, which I wasn't sure about doing at all, especially since the comments in those old videos were 50-50 between kind comments to somebody who was clearly a beginner, and Gundam fans that weren't happy with my burnt-out assessment of GB3 going... So here we are, Gundam Breaker 4. This game exists as a follow-up to GB3 in the continuity of the series. And if you're wondering, what about new Gundam Breaker in this continuity? What about new Gundam Breaker in this continuity? The story this go around is about how we're playing a beta build of the newest Gunpla battle simulator, which has a long-ass name that only exists to abbreviate it as GB4. Get it? Because we're playing GB4 as characters playing GB4?
Sometimes my genius is... it's almost frightening.
We begin in the days leading up to its official release. Our self-insert character is new to the beta, but almost immediately starts making friends with our innate talents courtesy of God and anime. This eventually leads to us making a clan and quickly climbing the ranks because we're just so darn good, you guys. Along the way, we get the tried and true Super Gundam mode thing that every Gundam series seems to not be able to live without these days, and the eventual attention of the cliche top dog character, as well as some other weirdos throughout the story, such as this guy literally called Chaos who leads the not subtly at all evil clan called the Freedom Fleet, which is, yeah, I'm not touching that. We even get this one character, Lilin, who is a visual carbon copy of this other team member named Lin, and is so very clearly an AI that the fact this ragtag bunch of chronically online teenagers can't tell is honestly baffling to me.
What the? Hey, why is your player name all scrambled? I guess bugs do happen in beta tests, right?
Yes?
Well, we're all here, so now I can tell you what we're doing today.
Dumbass motherfucker.
Especially when it's low-key implied that you can't change your avatar, and she just does that because the group mentions how confusing it is that she's so identically similar to Lin. Also, she's usually sitting around in scenes asking questions that most normal people just kinda know.
I am simply asking a normal human question out of curiosity, not to mine data, human!
Them aside, the characters you meet along the campaign are each mildly interesting in that they're all some kind of tried and true anime archetype, such as Tao, a nerd who often gets teased and soft bullied by the team, who is, surprise, a nerd IRL who gets hardcore teased and bullied at school, but eventually learns to stand up for himself and be confident. Lin, who I just mentioned, is a bit abrasive with a competitive side, but also has a heart of gold and a tragic history to boot. That means her little competitive side is a result of her companionship with the clan, leading to big time personal investment in the game and the team, resulting in that competitive nature. And she gets a period there where she starts to get down on herself because she feels ineffective next to our MC, but she comes to have faith in her abilities all the same by the end. We get Sheena, the obligatory sheltered rich girl who is pressured by her family to stick to their expectations of her, but she becomes staunchly loyal to the clan and manages to use that passion to compromise with her family, enabling her to remain with the clan while fulfilling her duty to the family, which is nice, I suppose. We also see that guy Mr. Gunpla from GB3 as a shoutcaster, along with this VTuber-esque character named Rico who has wireless ponytails. I know this is anime, but how the fuck does that work? And they serve as this game's version of the World Tournament announcer from Dragon Ball. But I really only bring them up because there's this one character who basically bought a founder's pack and got a Mr. Gunpla skin from it, so we stick to calling him Mr. so that we don't confuse the two. And the mystery of their identity is occasionally played up by the obvious curiosity surrounding what they really look like. But then there's scenes that imply a somewhat close connection with Lin, such as when they run a mission with you and start asking questions about how she's been doing lately, and unprompted just starts divulging details about her tragic past to you, so that's neat. Interesting in that down the line when everybody starts getting attacked near the finale of the game, Mr. takes some damage to his suit that actually reveals him to be Misa from Gundam Breaker 3 because she's also Lin's cousin apparently, which is a nice bit of continuity welding between Gundam Breaker 3 and 4, so I appreciate that. And it also reinforces this theory I personally have that Meister Jin is a stand-in for the player character from Gundam Breaker 3. There's a lot of references to it. He also is able to do Awakening, he mentions Misa by name and calls her a champion and welcoming her into the team for the finale. A lot of that just kind of makes me think that they don't hard confirm it in the game, so it is what it is. I'm almost salty to admit that to me, the most interesting side character was Mashima. Now, Mashima is one of those characters who's all about the ladies. and he dryly says that he doesn't bother to remember the names of men. He's high-key cringy with this shit, I'm not gonna lie. If you were to make a Venn diagram of the levels of thirst between Brock from Pokemon, Sanji from One Piece, and Mineta from My Hero Academia, he'd lean somewhere between Brock and Mineta, but only a little closer to Brock because he's not, like, gross level thirsty, just cringe thirsty.
So that's the other team, huh?
Careful, Mashima. They won't be easy.
I hope not. After all, I've got to show my girl what I can do.
He shows up just as we needed a 6th member to meet the requirements for clan battles, and not only is he convenient, but clearly skilled as a battler. Despite that, I was almost completely over him as a character when it turns out that he actually has a good backstory. He was the ace pilot of another clan called Nishiwaki Engineering, who struggled to afford the cost of entering competitions when they found a sponsor that required one of their own pilots to be on the team, meaning someone had to get cut. We learned this from a guy named Yuki, who it turns out was the protege of Mashima, but also the original intended cut. When Mashima learned this, he opted to quit the team to save Yuki from his fate, and that ended up leaving him feeling jaded about gunpla battling, right up until he joined up with us to try and flirt with Sheena. But he ended up coming face to face with his past. With the support of the clan though, he finds that flame again and becomes a reliable member of the team. This right here is writing. It's a surprising level of character depth that I wasn't expecting, but I'm glad it's there because he's in a minority of characters that I found interesting at all because he didn't completely rely on tropes to fill a spot, even when he still managed to make me cringe by flirting with Sheena at the very next post-mission scene.
Is that how you play when you're actually trying? It's quite a sight.
Wait, was that a compliment, babe? In that case, I'll have to give it my all more often.
Anywho, this game is 6 chapters that are basically split into 4 standard anime arcs. The introductions, the team building, the tournament arc, and the final battles. Once we meet everyone and get better acquainted as a team, we enter into a tournament, cause tournament arcs are always fun, right? Well, that guy Chaos we mentioned earlier and his team is all over this bit, and while they were on some Team Rocket shit before trying to steal away the MC to their team because his awakening ability makes him a rarity within the game, at a certain point they recognize immediately that Lilin is an AI, despite nobody else apparently being able to do that, and come to a very roundabout way of hijacking the whole plot. Earlier you get a chance to run a mission with Meister Jin, the de facto top dog of GB4, and he reveals that there's basically been a problem with hacking, which rings a little familiar since during the story there's been random moments where the game glitched mid-mission. Sheena looks more into it and learns that players have been referring to it as GBV, to which I immediately responded, so the Gundam Breaker virus. But it's actually called the Gundam Brainwashing virus, to which I say, same shit. At a later point, one of the Freedom Fleet higher-ups meets Lilin in private and lies about being friends with you to get close to her and give her a handshake, which comes complete with a random sound effect signifying that something just happened. They try to play this up, but it's super obvious. And then they give it away even further when they mention that GBV can be passed from player to player with so much as a handshake, and Lilin elects to not speak up about this. Never have I once considered that an AI would be the type of person to hide a zombie bite when they got infected. This all comes to a head when you make it to the final round of the tournament and the match is interrupted by the Freedom Fleet, who reveal that they have been behind the spread of GBV, cause duh, before kidnapping Lilin, who they plan to use in order to take over the game, and sicking a literal legion of infected gunpla battlers on the squad. After which, Chaos holes up in a tower he created and forces us to fight his 4 kings to get the keys to open the gate. So we do that, destroy a bunch of monoliths in an incredibly dragged out sequence of missions, then move on to challenge Chaos, who came to the fight with his very own version of the Dark Gundam from G Gundam with the help of Kyoji! So we take it down and save Lilin, but then Chaos decides to fuse his Gundam to it and kick up a round 2 with us, Lilin in tow. We beat him again, and as Chaos laments his defeat, it's revealed by Meister Jin that Chaos was once a dev on GB4, so basically he got laid off and wanted to sabotage the game as revenge. Get it? Cause topical. I was already kinda clocked out because the plot was taking its sweet ass time to get to the point, but for this twist to be revealed at the end, I just didn't care, to be honest. I'm sure some people would see this as something more, but to paraphrase one of Migsby's mods from the stream where we did our first clear of the story, this man is a little too old for this type of crash out over a video game like this. I don't care if he worked on it or not, but whatever. Hey everybody, Editing Room Giant here, and I wanted to take a minute to correct myself right about here because on review, I realized that I was just straight up wrong about the detail of Chaos being a developer who got laid off. It actually turns out to be the exact opposite. Chaos is a developer who actively quit because he found out the company making GB4 was trying to use AI to help develop the game, and so he quit, crashed out, and tried to use AI to sabotage the game, and I don't know, man. I feel like it was my duty to make sure that I corrected myself, but I also feel like there's something about that makes my point about the whole topicalness of the games industry talk just still stand, because not Bandai Namco trying to gaslight us into being against the anti-AI guy when they were fighting allegations of using AI in their games last year. I find that so funny. Like, that's not... Anyway, I had to get that out my system. Proceed. We saved Lilin in GB4 with the power of friendship, and the story ends with the game seeing a successful public launch. Great. The story is far simpler than it presents itself as in certain areas, and it's certainly full to the point of bursting with tropes, so much so that my eyes were just glazing over during some of the dialogue. Or when they tried to introduce plot elements as some kind of mystery that were completely obvious. Or when they expected me to believe that a bunch of terminally online kids can't spot a literal bot in their ranks. I'm sorry, the plot is kind of dumb. And I gave you an abridged fly-through of the story because I don't want to waste more time on it, so I'm moving on. Despite that, in my mind, nobody really cares about the story to these games, even though there were definitely a few people in my GB3 review comments nitpicking how I incorrectly stated that a plot point was missing, and I did. That's truly my bad. I've tried to be better with that kind of thing since, so shout out to me from learning from my past mistakes, but also, that didn't make the story any better, so I'm sorry, I don't really care, and neither do y'all. We're here to figure out whether or not this game is good to play, and I'm very ready to get into that because with this series, we've received one game officially launched in the West, and it was the worst one. The most recent good game was the one you had to import, dealing with the fluctuating cost to buy it in order to experience a game that, at the time, didn't move the needle for me because I was burned out. In a way, I needed that burnout to keep me separated from these games because it has been years since I touched them, and now that I've played Gundam Breaker 4, after having that distance from it, I really like this game. It's clear that it's still not perfect, but what we got is enjoyable. Very enjoyable. It ain't perfect though. As far as gameplay setup, this game looks at NGB and says, we're closer to GB3 territory here. The mission structure is usually presented as having multiple types of objectives, but it's a standard hack and slash, so it all boils down to kill everything on screen most of the time. All the while looting enemies for their precious Gundam parts in hopes of making your own super dope Gunpla build, which is the real draw of these games. And that sounds super basic, right? That's because it is, but this is the kind of game that lives off of the premise of customization, because at the end of almost every mission, you may have picked up something that you want to swap something else out for, and constantly make a run to see how your tweaked build performs in battle. Simplicity at its finest, I swear. And they carried over some building mechanics from GB3 that I didn't mention back then. There are builder parts, which are smaller parts for additional bells and whistles to your build that can offer additional skills on top. And then there are plastic parts, dropped during battle, that are spent leveling up parts you already have equipped, both in general stats and rarity. That latter part is nice because maxing the rarity on a part allows you to master the skills attached to the part, allowing you to equip that skill regardless of parts. And there's a cool visual aspect to it where your part kind of turns into a virtual version of the original part where the skill came from, which is a cool touch. One set, the set on the bottom right corner of the screen, is cooldown centric, whereas those skills on the bottom left spend a meter that accumulates during combat. And the skills can be added in from other builder parts, as well as your regular parts from your own build, down to the weapons you equip. I usually choose to add funnels into the mix via builder parts for some AoE support because I personally prefer melee focused builds. If you want to see more crazy shit, you can just look up the Gundam Breaker Reddits or just Twitter, I guess, because people have been going insane with these. There's a lot of them that people have just been throwing in my Discord, and the minute I saw somebody made Broly from Dragon Ball in GB4, I just kind of like, this is so cool. Lastly in there, we have the Awakening mode, the obligatory ultimate overdrive mode that turns up all your combat output. But in this, you can set it to one of 4 variations that do different things, like increasing attack, speed, defense, or the one I use is a debuff for all nearby enemies. It also comes complete with an ultimate skill that can be a number of attacks or even a full team res, which can be a lifesaver for high-level missions during multiplayer missions and such. But I'll touch on that in a few. I just want to finish talking about combat, because I think the big thing to me is that the combat has a really good weight to it. It's kind of hard to convey unless you play it yourself, but even outside of this series, I think many games from Bandai based on anime IPs, hell, even a lot of their original games, lean too hard into the presentation of anime power fantasies, where you can wield gigantic weapons with one hand and swing it like a knife, which looks cool, I guess, but as I play more well-crafted action games with time, it begins to feel cheap. This game doesn't suffer that problem. There is an overall speed to everything, yet many of the weapons change the speed of attacks, which lends to a more authentic weight of movement that I really appreciate. It ain't as accurate as, say, Gundam Battle Operation 2, but feeling like beam sabers, great swords, axes, maces, javelins, barehanded, and so many other kinds of original weapons all feeling different is key to incentivizing experimentation. You even get to mix and match because this game lets you equip each hand individually, and in gameplay there are separate buttons for each individual weapon, allowing for just that much more variety with ranged or melee weapons in their entirety. This game nails its loop by allowing this in short spurts on top of farming certain missions for certain parts. It's nice that as you progress the story, you can buy certain kits from the store for inexpensive prices to get quicker access to certain parts, weapons, skills, etc. But you're gonna wanna farm because those bought kits offer stats on the lower end, and drops have randomized stats. So unlike NGB, no two mirrored parts are identical statistically. But it's also worth noting that buying a part from the store actually can just give you an avenue to mastering the parts so you can get the skills you want and move on. Beating the story grants access to master grade parts, which again, for the non-Gunpla fans who didn't play the other Gundam Breakers, are 1/100th scale parts as opposed to the starter high grade parts at 1/144th scale. At the time you get these, you might think that these parts are of higher stats, but that's not necessarily true. By this point, you'll have progressed so far that most parts are naturally dropping at higher stat rates, but when I started getting them, my build, entirely composed of HG parts, were higher stats. So it might be a slow transition for some to move into a bigger scale build that you can upgrade for higher stats, but that also has this indirect motivation to continue playing because you're immediately thrown into the New Game Plus section where you can replay the whole story at your leisure. Finally, getting to bring it up proper, this is where multiplayer can come in clutch for longevity of this game. The lobbies are low-key set up like a Monster Hunter lobby because you can have a lobby with up to 24 players and then you can set out on missions in 3-player teams. Generally speaking, the matches handle well enough. I didn't run into a lot of lag or anything like that, but there was the occasionally inconvenient disconnect as a mission loaded where I would then be unable to connect with my friends afterward and eventually needed to reset in order to snap everything back to working order. The majority of the time where it does work, there's still a weird desync where what you see and or are fighting may not line up with everyone else. There are times I've seen enemies randomly exploding in front of me while I see my teammate punching the air halfway across the stage, so that can definitely be jarring or funny depending on how you see it. It might be a little frustrating though when drops are not equal across the team, so when you end up being not the person who got the kill, you can potentially miss out on parts you want. This, in a weird way, didn't truly diminish my enjoyment of playing in a multiplayer setup, but it did make the process of grinding for certain builds a little tedious at times. It also helps minimize boredom from a lack of mission variety when you have to do something like fight a giant version of the RX-78 or Unicorn Gundams for the 3rd or 4th time in one playthrough, which is another odd bit of repetition, especially considering there's one mission at the halfway mark where they make you fight a giant burning Gundam and you're just like, why aren't there more giant Gundams? But in this setup, even if you're playing with someone who hasn't finished the story, you can still farm parts scaled to yourself, so it's not all for nothing. That also means you can basically taxi players to endgame and benefit along the way while they kind of catch up to where you are. Realistically though, given my experience with the series, I'm so happy that these work at all, however janky it can be, and that I'm not sitting around in utterly dead lobbies trying to convince friends to buy this game just so that I don't end up playing the game alone all the time. Something about going from having to buy 4 extra copies of New Gundam Breaker just to finish online trophies for the platinum to a lobby full of 90 randos who got me sitting around like, yo, this build is sick, how'd you make this? And having them full on volunteering to play with me is such a refreshing experience. I do really think that's been a game changer for the experience as a whole because the social aspect of the Gunpla community is in full effect here. There's been so many posts I've seen online, as I said before, people just sharing absolutely wacky shit, people sharing their builds in my Discord, the want to grind together, and the whole clan aspect that I hope will turn into a more competitive kind of thing down the line, but I'm not really too worried about that right now. Even if that doesn't happen, it doesn't change my enjoyment of the game as it is now one bit. It's all pretty solid visually too. When you get away from the cutscenes where you typically see all the characters Gunpla awkwardly standing in a circle emoting like school kids, the level of detailing you can do on the individual builds are striking, and they look good in battle. Everything runs at a usually stable frame rate, which is another far cry from what we got in the past, but also it's worth noting that on PS5, where I played it, there's one stage near the end where the environment is a graveyard of Gunpla kits with discarded part runners all over the place, and this one stage for some reason was subject to pretty bad frame dips, and that struck me as odd because I didn't think there was anything visually stressful about it. But it was one of the more unique locales and is one section only, so it's just a standout when the rest of the game runs so smooth, especially near the end. As far as the rest, every other environment is the usual stuff you expect when you think Gundam, right? There's mountainous stages, some deserty stages, some with some green, some that are a little more factory, some a little more spacey. That's all fine, and there's nothing wrong with them. I just feel that for a game that can take the average person around 20-ish hours to beat, it starts to wear a little thin visually when you're seeing them repeated very often throughout the game. I also personally played it for way more than 20 hours, so that's a detail. Still, they're nice and polished with, aside from the aforementioned graveyard stage, minimal technical issues. Additionally, it's nice to see my build during cutscenes, but mid-mission cutscenes also have your teammates subbing in for other NPCs when you run multiplayer sessions, so it's cool to see everyone get a little bit of shine during these moments. Coming to the end of this, I also want to talk about the music. Honestly, I think the soundtrack is pretty serviceable, but I also have a hard time remembering anything that sticks out. I think I'm just spoiled as a Gundam fan, because a majority of Gundam games tend to reuse or remix the best tracks from the literal decades of animes, so we almost never complain about that. Hell, the only time we do is when they miss specific tracks from our personal faves. Here, they went with an all-original soundtrack, and unfortunately, through no real fault of its own, it fails to stand out. It's mostly a lot of rock and electronic music with an occasional orchestral piece thrown in, which is very reminiscent of pretty much any Gundam soundtrack in the modern era, to be honest, but I still can't help myself but think what it would have been like to just wreck the Devil Gundam with G Gundam soundtrack blaring in the background, you know? Maybe that's just me, but still. Fingers crossed there'll be some of that in the season pass, huh? Yeah, more Gundams and missions are nice, but Bandai, hear me out on this. At the end of the day, with all jokes and nitpicks aside, I'm very pleased with Gundam Breaker 4 as a whole. It only took like 6 years, but I'm finally happy to have gotten a game that people are actually playing and having a good time on, that is officially out in the West so that we don't have to rely on inflation-adjusted imported copies of GB3 for a good time, you feel me? But they took the best parts of what came before and streamlined the experience to create a solid game overall. They didn't need to reinvent the wheel with this, but they just needed to roll it back to before they made us play a story mode 7 times to unlock a story mode where a high school student romances their teacher, because why was this a thing? I don't want to get hung up on that anymore though. I'm just glad I had a genuinely fun time playing this game as opposed to playing it out of spite. But how do you feel? What has Gundam Breaker 4 been like for you? Feel free to drop a comment and share your thoughts with me so that we can discuss. I usually take the time to respond to as many comments as I can actually see, so, you know, there will be conversation to be had. And if you made it to the end, thanks for watching the video. If you like the video, make sure you like it and maybe subscribe to the channel so that you can stay tuned for whatever comes next. You can also follow me on Twitch for live Let's Plays of games like this, or just catch me goofing off on any of my other socials. Also, thank you to my patrons. I appreciate all of the support, but if you want to support the works on this channel, be sure to check out the One Sleepy Giant Patreon, where we accept all kinds in the Sleepy City crew. You can also get things like early access to these videos as they're completed and high quality versions of my thumbnails for wallpapers and things of that nature. That's all the time I have for today though, so thank you for your time. Until next time, my name is Hector and I'm One Sleepy Giant. I had a lot of fun, but I gotta go farm some more parts before I hit the sack, so let's pick this up later, okay? Take care, everybody.